Welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm Kathryn. If you've been following this show, you know what we do here is we're wanting to inspire you. If you have a book or a story in your mind and you want to get it on paper, we want to talk about some of the ways you can do that. And we've never actually looked at stage presentations. So today I'm very fortunate to have Spirit of Newfoundland and Labrador with me in the studio, John Halley, artistic.
No, my father is John, my brother is John.
Oh, and you're Peter.
I'm the baby boy, Peter.
Peter, thank you. I love it.
Yeah, so I'm joined today with John Williams, a co-writer of the show that we're going to talk about, and also Keith Power.
I knew there was a John in there.
There's a John in there.
I had a John in there.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone, and it's just such a pleasure to have you here. I saw your show last night at the Arts and Culture Center, which was absolutely fabulous. It was about the 100th anniversary of Beaumont Hamel, and anyone who didn't see it really missed something.
It's a special show. We, after we had it written and put it up, it was a commission, our first commission. We've performed over, I think it's 86 or 87 original shows now. So you think that people, when we go to embark on writing a show, people say, oh, you know what you're doing? But no, it's a brand new process every time, because you really have to find, you have to find, first of all, what it is you're writing about, and then define your characters and your story and where you're going. But this show, because the history was there, it sort of wrote itself. Well, it didn't write itself, obviously. We worked hard, but the history is there, and we followed the journey of the first 500 as they came in to sign up to be part of the regiment, and the training process, and then traveling to England, Act 1. And then we followed them through training and to Gallipoli, and then finally Beaumont Hamel. And
spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Right? Yeah. But so it was our first commission. A woman had approached me after seeing several of our shows, Helen Escott. I don't know if she watches this show, but it'd be nice for her if her name, Helen, and she's great, and she's part of the CLB, and she went after some funding from different groups, and she funded the project, and so the CLB own the show now. We rent it from them.
So the CLB, what would that be?
The Church Lads Brigade.
Brigade.
Yeah.
Okay, just
The
for
CLB.
people who might not know that. And,
Well, the armory in St. John's, it was destroyed by fire in 1992. However, the original archway remains intact. And those are the arches that those young men would have marched through and marched out of after they'd become members of the regiment. So historically, it's really significant.
And it was really special because we were lucky enough to be able to perform the first 3 nights of this show at the CLB Armory.
Right. So they commissioned the show, and they said they were going to sell the first 3 nights. And because they fit more people there, it was like 250, 300 people a night. They had dignitaries there, and it's a larger cavernous building, and we did our little our minimal stage set, which you saw last night.
Which it is quite minimal, but
but effective,
very effective,
right?
Yeah.
And because it's 1914, and the Union Jacks are present, and the costumes are appropriate, obviously, and I think we all reacted the same way when we did this show. We knew we had a good show, but we didn't know how people were going to react. We didn't know if they were really going to buy into the history, of course, but the way we navigated our way through the history. And there's something a little nerve-wracking about making this topic a little bit comedic.
Yes, and that was one thing I was going to ask you, because you do present it that way, that it is, I mean, it's obviously a very sad topic, and so many lives were lost, but you did it so well, you balanced it so well throughout the show.
We had a reputation to uphold as well, because we're known for our comedy pieces most of all, but the sadness of war, just to mix those two was quite a challenge, but I think we captured it.
Well, the source material we had to work with really lent itself to that, because you're talking about a bunch of Newfoundlanders who went over, and of course they were known for how they handled their stress and how they handled all the hard things they had to do. They liked to have a good time. They liked to laugh and make light of things, and that's how they dealt with it. And so we had lots of stuff to work with there too.
Yeah, Newfoundlanders we are because it's war and it's death and it's grieving and it's potential death. We are perhaps the kindest, nicest people on the planet. We can say that now. We wouldn't have been able to say that 20 years ago, but we can say that now. It's known. It's I mean, there are beautiful people all over the world.
Sure.
Our culture is we are known for that. And because there is a, you know, potential death and threat, we make light of it. You know, like in the scene last night when the soldiers march off and, you know, bye, I love you, Joey. And one of the mothers says, now you get out of bed the moment they call you, do you hear me? And she's, you know, she's being...
Which you could so hear.
Right,
Yeah.
which you could totally hear.
Yeah.
And people snort with laughter and tears at the same time. I hear them in the audience at that point because they know, they hear their grandmother or their great-grandmother or their mother say those very things. You know, because I don't know whether it's we're afraid to really expose our emotions and say, like, now, Joey, we're going to war, there's a possibility you might die. I don't think that was a conversation that anybody ever had. They skirted over it with humor and with our turn of phrase and our way of dealing with things. A great big sea hove in Long Beach. A great big sea hove in Long Beach, rightful la da 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 little dido. A great big sea hove in Long Beach, and Granny Snook, she lost her speech. To me right fall dee fall day. Didn't mean to sing a song here today.
But it was nice.
Thank you. But that was a tsunami that came into the shores of Newfoundland and killed many people and did horrific damage. In fact, so much so that Granny Snooks never spoke again. And Granny Snook, she lost her speech. To me right fall dee fall dee. You know, they're going to make light of it. We are going to make light of it.
Well, there are many tragic things in the history of Newfoundland. So, I mean, what other way, you know, you have to find a coping mechanism.
It's
and this
just the
seems
truth.
to be the way we have. So, in writing the script, and you mentioned the challenge of taking a topic that's so very sad and the history is written, and then to surmount that. So, did you approach it from scenes or dialogue? How do you guys all get together in a room and lock the door and not come out till you have a draft? Or
Well, every
what do you
different
do?
show, I think, has a different process. I mean, we lend things from other ways, but this particular one, the timeline was set. So we had a beginning, middle, and end written in history. And we had to fill in the gaps for that one. And I think we just kind of, and we look at the cast of people who we have and think of who they could play. And we took some actual characters from history and then just kind of formed our scenes around them, you know?
We knew that, for example, it was such a thrill last night in the audience. Every single time we've done this show, at the end of the show, we throw it out to the audience and say, is there anybody you would like to acknowledge, maybe connected to your family or related somehow, or you know them, connected to the first 500. And last night, Leonard Trethaway Sticks, Regimental number 1.
Regiment
His
number 1.
grandson's wife.
There you go.
Right.
was in the
Shirley.
audience.
Shirley Morrow, good friend of mine.
Shirley, yeah.
And I was with Shirley.
And all of the cast said they got goosebumps when they said Leonard Trethaway Stick. And she said afterwards, she said, I was thinking, you know, if they don't mention his name, I'm going to come up to them after and say, Leonard Trethaway Stick. But, you know, so the process was they approached Spirit of Newfoundland and asked us to do this, right? And I sat with a historian, and he just said, it has to be accurate, and I'm not a historian and I didn't know anything, so I asked him questions, and I said, just tell me about like the men who came in. They came in here, and he said yes, and then they went to Pleasantville, and then they walked to the marched through the city, and everybody sang "Keep the Home Fires Burning." I just went, okay, that's got to be a scene
That's
somehow.
very powerful, yeah.
And if we had soldiers, that's even better. So we were, you know, sometimes the process is it might be completely different from what you plan. We wanted to get authentic uniforms, and had we not gotten those uniforms, we probably wouldn't have had those soldiers. Like, necessity is the mother of invention sometimes.
Of course, yes, yeah.
And then we got these uniforms, and we went, oh, so John can come off the stage and be the lead soldier and then train these soldiers, and so everything happens, it falls into place. Organically often.
And again, the difference in what you're doing is you're writing for stage. If someone's writing for a book, it's in the mind of the person reading the book at that point.
Right.
They can create their own characters, and to some degree they're described, but you know, it's in here, but on stage, it's out there. And so in a short period of time, you had to cover a huge topic, like,
Yeah.
and do it so well. So it was very succinct. I mean, choosing your scenes was very interesting.
We hit, I think we did well.
Yeah.
Oh, you did
We did
well.
well. No, we did, you know, because we had, from the rooms, we had some of these monologues and letters that were actually, you know, the real deal. We did some voiceovers, and John did this voiceover at the end. The thing that me personally I didn't want to see, I didn't want to hear gunfire, and I didn't want us crawling on the ground and acting out that section of, you know, I didn't want to see that. You know, we wanted to treat that respectfully and not have to dramatically recreate that. So I think what we present is that you get real people, real characters that you can relate to and you love. Like those women, you know, Keith's monologue about the Sylvia.
The mothers and the old.
The mothers and the old. You know, that was a really big part of the history too. A lot of the women felt like there's nothing we can do. I mean, we're not a man. We can't enlist, you know, and go overseas. What can we do? And the stories of, you know, the people putting chocolate in socks and, you know, writing little notes. Right? I mean, just gorgeous stuff.
Yeah.
Dave Anthony's going to kill me. We just went out for lunch, and
No,
he said, I'm not a crier. I go to funerals and I see movies. I don't cry. He said, last night it started back here, and I felt this little twinge, and he went, I think I might cry. And it was a scene where it was John and Keith, and he has to say he's gotten these letters from home, and then he said, I can't read. I don't know how to read. And John's character so nicely says, I can help you if you want. You know, it's really beautiful. And he, being a teacher now as a retired teacher, he said, I think it was my teacher empathetic side just came out, and I went, and he said it just came, and then the two people next to him felt it as well, and as soon as he started, they had just automatically started. That is so sweet.
It's those little fine points that you picked out, because no doubt so many men who went over there perhaps couldn't read.
Yeah,
They weren't the most educated people. There wasn't the opportunity. People were poor. They didn't have a lot, and yet they wanted to serve.
Yeah, the first 500, there was an arc of people from all over the island. There were 4 air boys, and they were the money people in St. John's, and they were well educated, well exposed to many things. They could have been, you know, and any of the men, but many of them were illiterate. Some of them were very well educated. It was a full generation of Newfoundlanders that were completely, that could have been our leaders, you know, that could have rewritten our history. Yeah, but it's really interesting to think what if, you know.
And I think in terms of some of the things you did, like the danger tree was up there, that covered a lot of what you didn't show.
Right.
Just the image.
Well, there's so much to it that, you know, that we couldn't do. I think a lot of these monologues and a lot of the voiceovers do.
Yes.
Sum up a lot of stuff.
Do help include, you know, a lot of things. I did an interview this morning, and someone asked about how we dealt with Beaumont Hamel, and if we included all these different names. And in the monologue, they're included, in the recorded monologue. But, you know, many of them, they could be a story of their own. But, of course, with the history, there were certain things that we had to certainly at least mention or refer to.
And that's when you're dealing with the show, and as we said, it kind of wrote itself because we have this timeline. But when you're talking about this topic specifically, I find that Newfoundlanders have this sort of weird idea of the story of the Newfoundland Regiment in World War I ended with Beaumont Hamel. And so even though that sort of presents this sort of organic climax for our piece, in this voiceover that we did, we really wanted to make sure we mentioned what happened after Beaumont Hamel, because that's what's really important, that a lot of Newfoundlanders don't really think about. Because even though we had this big, huge loss of life, this huge tragedy that happened, they kept going. They kept sending people back.
They had 800 people again.
Yeah, and they picked it up,
yes.
and they kept, and they developed a really incredible reputation after that point for their conduct during the war. And even though so many people were dying, And you know, the what if. The what if doesn't end with Beaumont Hamel because they just kept going back, and it's that pride that's tragic in a way, because it's that pride that just led them into this massive loss of life. But I'm really glad that with that voiceover we were able to mention that.
And the fact the Royal Newfoundland.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, this is a very good point, isn't it? One of the interesting things about the writing process of this was there were certain songs that we wanted to get included, and Waltzing Matilda was one. It just tells such a beautiful story, and it tells the story of our connection with Australia and when they went to Gallipoli. And that whole campaign, John, you can speak to that better, was just awful, and so many people died of dysentery, and yeah.
Gallipoli was off, like World War I was terrible, obviously, but Gallipoli was this incredible experience where there was just it was, I won't get into details, but it was really bad. Even for World War I, it was really bad. And so Newfoundland formed this unique relationship with Australia and New Zealand, as we were the only North American contingent to also be present there. And so to this day, there's still this back and forth between Australia and New Zealand, and we still have parades on the 25th of April. And I'm actually a member of the regiment today, and we still, every 25th of April, there's a Anzac Day parade, and there's delegates from Australia who come over, and they're there in their shorts. In April.
Optimistic.
Oh, they're not quite sure, are they?
Well, their dress uniforms.
They don't know where they're going.
They have shorts in,
that's
in
uniform.
their military
That's the
uniforms,
uniform.
and they're shaking in their little boots. God bless their hearts. But
funny.
yeah, that connection is there, and it's just that funny little weather thing just drives home the odd relationship that we have. With them.
So when you're writing this, I mean, what kind of period of time, and are you acting the scenes as you write, or are you tackling it? You know, what's the process? Workshopping it?
A little bit of workshopping. Mostly we write and rewrite and then reread and think, that's not funny. Or, yeah, that's going to work. Always placing ourselves in the position of an audience.
Yeah.
Will that gravitate? Will that work? Will that be funny? Will that be sad? Will that read? And we base it on our knowledge of our own experience, I think, and what in theater, yeah, we've had we're 20 years old now, so we were lucky with our first few shows that we started with 20 years ago. The first one was called Hard Tickets in High Society, sort of like the upstairs, downstairs, Downton Abbey, if you will, mixture of people from different ends of society, and that in itself is hysterical. So we went out on stage at the beginning knowing nothing, and we knew how to present ourselves. We were singers, we were musicians, but we learned really quickly where the laughs were and how to gravitate toward them.
Like you mentioned earlier, that what you have envisioned in your mind when you start writing is almost 100% not what's going to come out in the final product. You have your process, and you write your scenes, and then they just change throughout the process. When you think of other ideas, or when you sit back and look at it from an audience's view, be like, no, like that's not going to read. We're going to have to change that.
I love that point.
Crazy.
It's really interesting to look at your notes when you're writing a show, and then after you have the final product and you go back to the beginning. It's hysterical because you go, oh my God, remember when we were going to go there?
Right.
I love this show, by the way, the title of the show, and what it must do to inspire young people.
Yeah.
Because
Hopefully that's the whole idea of what we're trying to do here.
there's so many wannabe writers out there and creative people that this is great.
When this started, I thought, okay, we'll do 6 or 8 shows. 6, I think it was, but now I think this is 10, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. There's so many people creatively engaged with writing. But you mentioned your scripts are written with freedom built in. Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, I mean, Peter mentioned his company now is 20 years old, so you have a great group of people and a handful that have been there since day one. So like you and Sheila and Shelley, you know how to write for them. And so when Peter writes a line for them or for someone to say, there's an understanding that line can change based on this person's interaction with another person when they get together in the same room. So we don't expect you know where it's going to go. Yeah.
So I'll more to that point. So in this cast there are 6 people. We had one of our cast members have a shoulder surgery just before this tour. So one girl had to come out and replace her, and then someone new came in to replace her, who's replacing her, if that makes sense. And yeah, a lot of hers, you know what I mean. So move one person over here and a new person comes in to replace. And so she's reading the script and we said, sorry, that's the original script. And she said, okay, so what's the cue? And we said, oh, you'll know. And she was like, okay, it's going to be something like this. And she's like, what? I didn't know. And then so we ran it a few times and then she said, I exactly know what you mean. It's not necessarily the word, it's the end of the thought and intention of, for example, the doctor scene. Good afternoon, young man. You know, and then, you know, the doctor scene is very, it has to be organic. I mean, the lines are there, but there has to be, if someone does something physical, we did new things last night.
Always.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we did new things last night.
I like, you know, you had pickles in your pocket. You were doing everything to increase your weight.
Yeah. Well, this is that was true. I mean, that was something that when this historian was telling me about the you know, some of the men that would come through and others because of the propaganda, because of the, you know, I hope you're not embarrassed of your children because ours have answered the call. And so there was this real pressure, you know, for young men. So many of them who are underage and underweight went ahead and tried to get this job, and for them it was a job.
Yeah, so we took the fact of that actually happened and, you know, put a little bit of an artistic license to make it a bit more funny. You know?
Yeah. So that's a prime example of where the comedy, where we had a little bit more artistic license.
And it worked so well because, I mean, that scene, if you didn't do something like that,
it would just be dry, wouldn't it?
It'd be
flat, yeah.
It'd be very dry. And that is not at all the way that we imagine it. And there was so much came to life. But you did it with, say, how many scenes would you have had in there?
In the first act, I think there's 10
or 12.
10?
Yeah.
So about 18 to 20 different scenes. Yeah.
Okay, so do you decide that before you start, or
No,
because you're picking you're kind of picking your highlights.
We're picking our highlights and we go, oh, yeah, and we'll go through, might have act one written and go, oh, we forgot about we forgot about this, that we have to make mention or do a little transitional scene to get, you know, certain aspect in. Yeah. And then we'll go, ooh, act one is really long. So then we have to go,
okay.
Can we put it in act two or do we have to scrap it? You know?
Yeah. And editing is a huge process and it's very hard. When you have all these ideas and, you know, you come up with them with yourself, so you're obviously very proud of them.
You're married to them.
Yes, you are, especially if you
They're going to cut my line.
Yeah, well, you know, it's the same thing if you're writing a book.
It's true, Editing is it's horrible.
It's brutal.
And, you know, if I have my really funny scene, I'm already thinking of ways to deliver it. And then if that's the scene that's going to get cut, like, it just hurts.
It hurts.
You take it personal, but it's not.
Yeah, right. Oh, so you cut my line. Okay.
Right.
You know, so it's,
So
and
don't
then
be
everybody
afraid to
falls
cut
out.
Don't be afraid to cut out something that you're married to since the beginning for the greater good at the end of the
Well, you know,
book or
you hear
show.
that a lot. You hear that in books. They say, kill your darlings.
Yeah.
Just kill your darlings. It's just
Yeah.
let them go.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, not
Well,
that.
it's good to get an impartial person in to look at it and
Yeah.
say, you know what, this is not worth it. This is not worth the dramatic
Yeah.
effort. You know, it's really sweet and good for you and rub your ego for a minute, but let's throw it away.
And so do you do that? Do you have your audience that you bring in when you're just about there and get feedback or no?
Not overly.
No.
We're pretty good at figuring it out before it happens. But I mean, there are times where we'll open it opening night and realize something's not working, and whether or not we'll cut it, but we'd at least change it to make it more, you know, make it work.
I had a chat with someone a little while ago who asked that very question, what did you do at the beginning? And myself and Sheila Williams and Shelley Neville, we have lost our parents throughout this whole 20 years. So when we started, our parents were really supportive and, you know, they died. But right up until recently, Sheila lost her mom. And it started with my mother. We would finish a script and we'd come and read it to my mother. And she had wonderful comedic sensibility, a lovely flair for the dramatic. She was very, as well, she wouldn't cross a line socially. So her meter was my meter. I'd say, what do you think of that? No, I wouldn't say that.
Too crass, honey.
It's too crass, darling.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very funny. Oh, that's very funny. And so I was able to use her meter as our sort of barometer, and Shelley's mom and Sheila's mom as well.
I've never actually met your mother, even though I was in spirit around at the same time as she passed. But she is still in almost all the shows in some certain way, whether it's just one line, whether it's a whole character of a story. In our upcoming show, there's lots of her little mannerisms that will be featured in there for sure.
And Sheila's mother
Sheila's
is in
mother
there
as well. Shelley's mom as well was in the war show.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So we learn so much from our parents, and we learn different types of characters. And as kids, when we sit back, and especially if we're artistic and we're sponges, we don't realize we're doing it, but we're mimicking them, and we're recreating those characters in our show.
It's flattery, really. I mean,
It's flattery.
And kind of so much fun to do it, though. It really is. And, you know, we sat down here and I thought, how are we ever going to get all you guys contributing? But you've done such a great job. And I'm sure this is how the writing process kind of goes a bit.
we have our ups and downs.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. It's a frustrating process because I find, me personally, John, Keith work differently, I know, but I need pressure. I need pressure to sit down and sit down. Yeah, we need a date, and we sit. The show has to open by, and sometimes you'll just go, I have an idea, and you just, you know, and away we go.
Well, I tell you, as far as pressure in shows, you know, guys, we're almost out of time.
Well, maybe if we're back again, we'll come back.
Well, if you are back, I would love to do another discussion with you, because I want to find out, and we don't go into it, but you can tell me, so I'll know after. But you know, what happens to a script after, and copywriting and that type of thing.
Yeah.
We haven't had time to touch upon any of those things, which I'm sure you'd have a lot of information.
Yeah.
But hey, I want to thank you so much, and you guys are back at it again tonight. Let's hold up the poster.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and let everyone see that. And,
Where once they stood.
Where once they stood, and that's where a beautiful show, and it's going across the island.
These are the archways of the. This is the archway of the CLB Armory, actually. So that's the connection there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a wrap, and I want you guys to go break a bunch of legs.
Yeah,
Thank you
Kathryn.
so
That
much.
It was wonderful to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks.